There comes a moment in life that almost nobody talks about. Not the dramatic moment. Not the breakdown. Not some great tragedy. Just the quiet realization. You wake up one morning and notice how tired your mind has become from holding on to things that no longer need to be carried. Old conversations. Old expectations. Old versions of yourself. And what makes it strange is this. From the outside, life may look completely normal. You still go to work. You still answer messages. You still smile during conversations. You still handle responsibilities the way you always have. But internally, something feels crowded. As if your mind has become a room filled with unfinished thoughts. Many people spend years trying to fix this feeling by adding more to their lives. More productivity. More advice. More routines. More explanations. More control. But sometimes the mind is not asking for more. Sometimes it is asking for less. Less resistance. Less pressure. Less attachment to things that have already passed. And perhaps one of the most overlooked truths in life is this. Not everything needs to be solved immediately. So many things simply need to be seen differently. The Stoics understood this deeply. Not in a cold or emotionless way. But in a calm, grounded way. They understood that suffering often grows when the mind refuses to loosen its grip. And strangely enough, many people do not realize how tightly they are holding on to life until exhaustion finally reveals it. Holding on to how people should behave. Holding on to how the past should have unfolded. Holding on to how the future should look. Even holding on to the idea that they must always feel certain, strong, or in control. But life does not move that way. Life moves like water. And the more tightly we close our hands around it, the faster peace slips through our fingers. There is a reason so many people over the age of 45 begin questioning things they once chased endlessly. Because eventually, experience teaches what ambition never could. That peace is more valuable than proving something. That clarity matters more than winning every argument. That rest is not weakness. And that letting go is not giving up. It is understanding. Sometimes people imagine letting go as something dramatic. As if it means abandoning responsibilities or pretending not to care. But true letting go is quieter than that. It is the moment you stop arguing internally with reality. The moment you stop demanding that life unfold according to your personal timeline. The moment you realize that your mind has been carrying unnecessary tension for years. And perhaps the most freeing part is this. You do not have to force yourself to let go today. You do not have to rush your healing. You do not have to pretend you are fully ready. You only need to become aware of what you are carrying. Because awareness changes everything. The Stoics often reminded themselves that peace begins not when life becomes perfect, but when the mind stops fighting every imperfection. And maybe that is why so many people feel unexpectedly emotional when they finally hear these words. You are allowed to release what no longer serves your peace. Not because they are weak, but because part of them has been waiting years to hear permission they never gave themselves. Many people were taught how to achieve, how to endure, how to survive. But very few were taught how to soften their grip on unnecessary burdens. Very few were taught that wisdom is not always about holding on longer. Sometimes wisdom is knowing when to stop carrying what has already ended. And maybe, without realizing it, that is where your mind has been trying to lead you all along. Not toward escape. Not toward indifference. But toward lightness. Toward clarity. Toward a quieter relationship with life itself. Because deep down, most people are not truly searching for more control. They are searching for relief. And relief often begins with a simple shift. Realizing that you do not have to carry every thought that enters your mind. You do not have to replay every memory forever. You do not have to solve your entire future tonight. You can simply pause. Breathe. Observe. And slowly begin loosening the grip. Not all at once. Just enough to finally feel your own mind again. And once a person begins to understand this, an important question naturally appears. If letting go feels so freeing, why do so many people resist it for so long? That is where the deeper misunderstanding begins. And it changes more lives than most people realize. One of the most common misunderstandings about life is the belief that holding on proves strength. Many people quietly believe this without ever saying it out loud. They believe that if they keep worrying, they are being responsible. If they keep replaying the past, they are being thoughtful. If they keep carrying emotional weight, they are being loyal. But the mind can become trapped inside habits that feel noble while slowly draining peace away. And over time, people begin confusing emotional tension with meaning. The Stoics saw this clearly. They noticed how easily human beings attach themselves to unnecessary suffering simply because it feels familiar. Familiar pain can strangely feel safer than unfamiliar peace. Because peace requires something difficult. Trust. Trust that not every situation needs constant mental control. Trust that life can continue unfolding even when the mind relaxes. Trust that releasing internal pressure does not mean becoming careless. This misunderstanding appears in small everyday moments. Someone replays an old conversation for years, believing that if they think about it enough, they will finally feel settled. Someone keeps trying to earn approval from people who have already decided not to understand them. Someone carries guilt long after the lesson has already been learned. Not because they want to suffer, but because part of them believes letting go would somehow erase the importance of what happened. Yet holding on to pain does not preserve meaning. It only prolongs tension. There is a quiet difference between remembering something and remaining emotionally trapped inside it. And many people never notice that difference. The mind often says, "If I let this go, maybe it means it did not matter." But that is not true. Something can matter deeply and still be released. A season of life can be meaningful without needing to live inside your mind forever. This is one of the most liberating shifts Stoicism offers. It teaches that acceptance is not denial. Acceptance is clarity. It is seeing reality without adding endless resistance on top of it. Imagine carrying a heavy bag every single day for 20 years. At first, the weight feels unbearable. Then eventually, it feels normal. Not because it became light, but because you became used to being tired. Many people live this way emotionally. They become so accustomed to tension that peace feels unfamiliar. And when peace finally appears, they sometimes reject it without realizing why. Because the mind has spent decades believing that constant mental effort equals safety. But peace does not come from controlling every outcome. It comes from changing your relationship with uncertainty. That is why some people remain exhausted even when life becomes calmer. Their external situation improved, but internally, the habit of carrying remained. The Stoics repeatedly returned to one simple observation. Much of human suffering comes not from events themselves, but from the stories continuously attached to them. A difficult conversation lasts 10 minutes. The mind can replay it for 10 years. A disappointment happens once. The mind can relive it every morning. This does not make someone weak. It makes them human. But awareness creates choice. And once people begin seeing how much energy is spent resisting reality, something softens inside them. They begin realizing, maybe peace was never as far away as they thought. Maybe the mind was simply overcrowded. Overcrowded with pressure. Overcrowded with unfinished emotional loops. Overcrowded with expectations that no longer fit the person they have become. There is also another misunderstanding many adults quietly carry. They believe they must solve every emotional experience perfectly before moving forward. But life rarely works that way. So many chapters close without complete explanations. So many relationships end without perfect understanding. So many questions remain unanswered. And surprisingly, peace is still possible. Not because everything became clear, but because the mind stopped demanding total certainty before allowing itself to rest. This is why older age can sometimes bring unexpected wisdom. After enough years, people begin noticing patterns. They see how many things they once worried about eventually faded on their own. How many fears never arrived. How many arguments no longer matter. How many things felt permanent, until time quietly dissolved them. And gradually, another truth begins emerging. Life becomes lighter when you stop gripping every passing moment so tightly. Not careless. Not detached from humanity. Simply less afraid of release. Because holding on to everything eventually leaves no room for peace. And perhaps the greatest misunderstanding of all is this. People think letting go means losing something. But often, letting go is how you finally return to yourself. And once that realization begins to settle in, the entire way you look at life slowly changes. There is a powerful moment that happens when a person finally understands this. Life becomes easier to carry when you stop trying to carry all of it at once. The Stoics were not trying to escape reality. They were trying to see it clearly. And clarity changes the emotional weight of almost everything. Marcus Aurelius once observed that the mind becomes colored by the thoughts it repeatedly entertains. Not occasionally. Repeatedly. That means the emotional atmosphere of your life is shaped less by isolated events, and more by what your attention continuously returns to. This realization is simple. But it changes everything. Because so many people spend years unintentionally feeding the very thoughts that exhaust them. Not on purpose. Used automatically. A memory appears. The mind follows it. A fear appears. The mind expands it. An uncertainty appears. The mind tries to solve it endlessly. And slowly, inner tension becomes a lifestyle. But Stoicism introduces a gentler possibility. What if you do not need to follow every thought? What if awareness itself is enough? Imagine sitting beside a river. Leaves float past on the surface of the water. Some are beautiful. Some are broken. Some disappear quickly. Your thoughts behave the same way. But most people believe they must climb into the river and chase every leaf. The Stoic approach is different. Observe the leaf. Notice it. Then allow it to continue downstream. This is not suppression. It is discernment. The understanding that not every thought deserves permanent residence inside your mind. And once people begin practicing this, something remarkable happens. Mental space returns. Conversations feel lighter. Mornings feel quieter. Small moments become visible again. Many people have forgotten what it feels like to simply exist without mentally negotiating with life every minute. But peace often returns through ordinary moments. A slow walk outside. Morning coffee in silence. A conversation without rushing. Watching sunlight move across a room. The Stoics valued these moments because they understood something modern life often forgets. A calm mind notices life more deeply. Not because the world changed, because attention changed. And perhaps this is where letting go becomes misunderstood again. People think letting go means becoming passive. But real Stoic acceptance actually creates more energy. Because the mind is no longer wasting itself fighting reality. Think about how exhausting resistance can become. Resisting aging. Resisting uncertainty. Resisting other people's opinions. Resisting the fact that some chapters have ended. Eventually the mind grows tired not from life itself, but from constantly arguing with life. And the strange part is this. Many of the things people fear letting go of are already gone. The relationship already changed. The moment already passed. The version of yourself already evolved. Only the mental attachment remains. And attachments are often heavier than reality itself. This is why some people feel unexpectedly emotional when they finally stop carrying something mentally. Because they realize how much energy it was consuming quietly in the background. The Stoics often practiced viewing life from a wider perspective. Not to become cold, but to remember proportion. A frustrating moment today may feel enormous right now. But viewed across years, it may become almost invisible. This perspective softens emotional urgency. It reminds the mind that not every discomfort deserves permanent emotional investment. And perhaps one of the most freeing realizations is this. You do not need to control every experience to live peacefully within it. That idea alone can change the atmosphere of a person's life. Because so much exhaustion comes from trying to emotionally prepare for every possible outcome. But life cannot be fully managed that way. No human being can think their way into complete certainty. The Stoics knew this. So instead of demanding certainty from life, they practiced steadiness within uncertainty. And that is a very different way of living. It means you stop asking, how do I control everything? And start asking, how do I remain grounded while life moves naturally? That shift changes relationships. It changes aging. It changes work. It changes stress. It changes how a person experiences time itself. Suddenly, life stops feeling like a constant battle for emotional control. It begins feeling more like participation. You still care. You still act. You still love deeply. But you no longer collapse emotionally every time reality refuses to follow your expectations perfectly. This is why Stoicism is often misunderstood. People think it teaches emotional numbness. In truth, it teaches emotional balance. A softer grip. A clearer mind. A steadier relationship with change. And perhaps the most beautiful part is this. You do not need to transform overnight. You do not need to become perfectly calm tomorrow morning. Even recognizing these patterns is already the beginning of freedom. Because awareness quietly changes behavior over time. The mind begins noticing when it is gripping too tightly. And slowly, gently, it begins loosening on its own. Not because someone forced it, but because clarity naturally creates release. And once a person experiences even a small moment of that release, they begin understanding something deeper about themselves. Something most people spend decades searching for. The human mind has an interesting habit. It tries to protect us, even when protection is no longer needed. That is why people often continue carrying emotional tension long after a situation has ended. The mind believes vigilance equals safety. So it keeps replaying, rehearsing, preparing, analyzing. Not because it wants suffering, because it wants certainty. But certainty is one of the few things life rarely guarantees. And this creates a quiet conflict inside many people. Part of them wants peace. Another part keeps searching for complete control before allowing peace to arrive. The Stoics understood this conflict deeply. They noticed how often human beings postpone inner calm until conditions become perfect. Relax when everything is settled. I'll feel peaceful once I solve this. Let go after I fully understand what happened. But life continues moving. There is always another uncertainty waiting beyond the current one. Which means peace cannot depend entirely on external resolution. At some point, the mind must learn how to rest even while life remains unfinished. That idea alone can feel revolutionary. Especially for people who spent decades believing that tension was necessary for responsibility. But there is a difference between awareness and constant mental strain. A gardener waters plants carefully. They do not pull on the leaves every hour trying to force growth. Yet many people treat their minds that way. Constant pulling. Constant pressure. Constant monitoring. And eventually, emotional exhaustion becomes unavoidable. This is why so many people feel mentally tired even during quiet moments. Their bodies may be resting, but internally, the mind is still working overtime. Still gripping old fears. Still replaying conversations. Still trying to control outcomes that no longer exist. The Stoics practiced returning to the present moment because they understood something timeless. The mind often suffers more in imagination than in reality. A person may spend an entire week fearing a conversation that lasts only 5 minutes. Or carry anxiety about a future event that never arrives at all. Meanwhile, life itself is quietly happening around them. The warmth of coffee. The sound of rain. The calm of evening light through a window. Simply moments pass unnoticed because the mind remains trapped somewhere else. And perhaps this is one of the saddest forms of exhaustion. Being physically present, but mentally absent from your own life. Many adults eventually reach a point where they realize they have spent years postponing peace. Always waiting for the next achievement. The next solution. The next sense of certainty. But peace is not something hidden at the end of perfect circumstances. Often, it begins the moment resistance softens. The moment you stop demanding that life explain itself completely. The moment you stop believing every uncomfortable thought requires immediate resolution. And something surprising happens when people begin allowing uncertainty to exist without fighting it constantly. The nervous system relaxes. The body softens. Breathing slows. Even relationships improve. Because people who stop fighting themselves internally usually become gentler with the world around them too. There is also another important realization many people discover later in life. Not every thought reflects truth. Some thoughts reflect fear. Some may reflect habit. Some may reflect old emotional conditioning. But because people hear these thoughts repeatedly, they assume they must obey them. The Stoics challenged this assumption. They taught that thoughts should be observed carefully before being trusted completely. This creates emotional distance in the healthiest possible way. Instead of immediately becoming every thought, you begin witnessing thoughts as temporary mental events. And that small shift changes emotional experience dramatically. For example, a thought says, everything is falling apart. The Stoic mind pauses and asks, is that fully true right now? Usually, the answer is more balanced. So many things are uncertain. So many things are changing. But not everything is collapsing. This practice is subtle. Yet over time, it prevents the mind from drowning inside exaggerated emotional narratives. And perhaps that is why Stoicism feels increasingly meaningful as people age. Because after enough experience, people begin valuing emotional steadiness more than emotional intensity. They no longer want constant stimulation. They want clarity. Breathing room. Inner quiet. They want to feel present again. And presence becomes possible when the mind finally realizes it does not need to hold on to every fear in order to remain safe. Sometimes safety comes from trust. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your ability to recover. Trust in your ability to remain grounded even when life changes unexpectedly. This does not remove challenges from life. But it changes the emotional relationship with those challenges. And slowly, people begin discovering a deeper kind of freedom. Not freedom from uncertainty. Freedom from constantly fearing uncertainty. That is a profound difference. Because once fear loosens its grip, life begins feeling lighter again. Not perfect. Simply lighter. And from that lighter place, a person can finally begin living differently. Not through force, but through small, quiet shifts that gently change the direction of everyday life. Most meaningful change does not happen dramatically. It happens quietly. Slowly. Almost invisibly at first. That is why the Stoics focused so much on daily awareness rather than sudden transformation. They understood that peace is usually built through small moments repeated consistently. Not through emotional breakthroughs. And perhaps this is comforting. Because it means you do not need to reinvent your entire life tomorrow. You only need to begin relating to your mind differently. For example, one gentle practice is simply noticing when tension appears unnecessarily. Maybe you are sitting quietly, yet mentally arguing with a conversation from 3 days ago. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do I need to carry this right now? Not angrily. Not critically. Used honestly. Sometimes the answer will surprise you. Another simple shift is learning to leave certain things unfinished mentally. Not every problem requires immediate emotional resolution. Sometimes clarity arrives later, after the mind stops forcing it. This is difficult for people who spent years believing that constant thinking equals progress. But often, overthinking only deepens emotional fog. A calm mind sees more clearly than an exhausted one. The Stoics also practiced simplifying attention. Modern life constantly pulls the mind outward. News. Notifications. Opinions. Comparisons. Noise. And after enough exposure, people forget what inner quiet feels like. That is why small moments of stillness matter so much. A quiet morning before checking your phone. A walk without constant distraction. A meal eaten slowly instead of hurriedly. These moments seem ordinary. But they gently retrain the nervous system. They remind the mind that peace is available in simple experiences. Another powerful practice is releasing the need to explain yourself endlessly. Many adults carry invisible pressure to make everyone understand their choices, feelings, or boundaries. But not everyone will fully understand you. And strangely enough, that is okay. The Stoics believe dignity comes partly from no longer needing constant external validation. You can be respectful without over-defending yourself. You can be kind without abandoning your peace. You can care deeply, without carrying everyone else's emotional weather. This realization becomes especially freeing later in life. Because eventually, people recognize how much energy disappears trying to manage perceptions that were never fully controllable anyway. Another quiet form of letting go involves time itself. Many people carry guilt about not being further ahead. They compare their current life to imagined timelines they created years earlier. But life rarely unfolds in perfectly straight lines. So many lessons take longer. So many seasons arrive unexpectedly. So many forms of growth happen invisibly. The Stoic approach is not passive resignation. It is respectful acceptance of reality as it exists now, while still moving forward with steadiness. That balance matters. Because acceptance without effort becomes stagnation. But effort without acceptance becomes exhaustion. Wisdom lies between those extremes. Do you continue showing up for life? Do you continue learning, growing, caring, participating, but with less internal violence toward yourself? Less pressure to constantly prove your worth. Less fear that every imperfect moment means failure. And perhaps one of the gentlest practices of all is allowing yourself moments of enough. Enough productivity for today. Enough worrying for tonight. Enough carrying for now. Many people never pause long enough to feel this. Their minds stay trapped inside endless striving. Yet peace often enters quietly through permission. Permission to rest. Permission to pause. Permission to stop mentally chasing what cannot be controlled. This does not mean life becomes effortless. Challenges still come. People still disappoint you. Plans still change. Uncertainty still appears. But internally, something becomes steadier. You stop collapsing every time life shifts direction. And over time, that emotional steadiness creates surprising freedom. Because a calm mind wastes less energy fighting reality. Which means more energy becomes available for actually living. For noticing beauty again. For enjoying ordinary conversations. For appreciating mornings. For laughing more easily. For feeling present in your own life instead of constantly trapped inside mental resistance. And perhaps that is the quiet transformation many people are truly searching for. Not the perfect life. Use the latter relationship with the life they already have. At some point in life, many people realize something unexpected. The peace they were searching for was never hidden somewhere far away. It was buried underneath mental noise. Underneath pressure. Underneath resistance. Underneath the exhausting habit of carrying too much for too long. And perhaps this is why letting go feels so emotional sometimes. Not because something is being lost. But because something heavy is finally being set down. The Stoics believed that wisdom was not about controlling life perfectly. It was about learning how to meet life with steadiness. To stop fighting every moment that fails to match personal expectations. To stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world. To stop carrying emotional weight simply because it has become familiar. And maybe this is what maturity quietly teaches over time. You do not need to react to every thought. You do not need to solve every future possibility. You do not need to win every argument inside your own mind. So many things can simply pass through. Like weather. Like seasons. Like waves moving across water. There is tremendous freedom in realizing that thoughts are temporary, even when they feel intense. That emotions move. Memories soften. Life changes. And you change too. The version of you that once needed to hold on to certain fears may no longer exist. The version of you that once carried endless pressure may be ready for something gentler now. Not weaker. Wiser. Because wisdom often sounds quieter than fear. Fear rushes. Fear grips. Fear demands immediate certainty. Wisdom breathes. Wisdom observes. Wisdom understands that peace cannot grow inside a constantly clenched mind. And perhaps this is the real invitation hidden inside Stoicism. Not emotional suppression. Not detachment from life. But deeper participation in reality without unnecessary resistance. To sit with life as it is, instead of endlessly arguing with how it should have been. To appreciate simple moments again. To trust yourself enough to loosen the grip. To realize that inner calm does not come from controlling everything around you. It comes from no longer needing complete control in order to feel okay. That realization changes the atmosphere of life itself. Suddenly, mornings feel softer. Conversations feel less heavy. The future feels less frightening. Not because uncertainty disappeared, but because your relationship with uncertainty changed. And maybe that is the shift your mind has quietly been waiting for all along. Not perfection. Not total certainty. Just relief. A little more breathing room inside your own thoughts. A little more kindness toward yourself. A little less carrying. Because you were never meant to hold the entire weight of life alone. So many things are meant to move through you, not stay trapped within you forever. And when you finally understand that, something inside begins relaxing naturally. Not forced. Not dramatic. Just honest. You begin noticing how much beauty exists in ordinary moments once the mind stops resisting life constantly. The warmth of sunlight. A calm evening. The sound of your own breathing. A quiet conversation with someone you love. These things were always there. The mind was simply too crowded to fully notice them. But now perhaps there is a little more space. A little more stillness. A little more clarity. And if you take nothing else from this conversation, maybe let it be this. You are not stuck. You are simply learning how to see differently. And sometimes, that changes everything. If this helped you see life from a calmer perspective, consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, remember. You do not have to force yourself to let go all at once. Peace often begins the moment you stop gripping so tightly.